Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
What's going on out there in fantasy land? It is the Fantasy Football Hustle. I am your host, Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always by the analytical assassin, Dwayne McFarland of EstablishTheRun.com. And man, oh man, it's schedule release night, folks. So you know we got a big show. 3 hours, wall-to-wall, YouTube, Twitch, Tinder, however you're watching us tonight, we're ready to go because we got Graham Barfield of FantasyPoints.com in the house. And it's going to be a hell of a show. Dwayne, how you doing out there? Are you excited for the schedule to come out?
I'm so excited. I think you may have scared Graham off, though. I don't know that he wants to talk about schedules for 3 hours. Do we still have Graham?
I got to be honest. I've barely looked. I was napping before this. Got in some rest before the show, and I barely looked at the schedule. So I'm not up to date with everybody's takes and everybody's instant reaction.
Yeah, this is all important
schedule.
You'll see guys on ESPN, they're going to go game by game. Like, all right, here's a win, here's a loss in week 11. Like, none of this matters. I get that there's nothing else to do right now, but who cares? Like,
these teams, they change so much within the year. There's injuries, depth charts change. Like weeks 1 through 3, I look at strength of schedule at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. But past the first couple of weeks, we have no idea what we're predicting.
That's last year. All we kept saying in the offseason was draft the Patriots defense because they had a cake first month of the schedule. And little did we know they'd go on to become this juggernaut, but that's what you need to look for when you're drafting a defense. But we'll get into all that kind of fun stuff. We got Graham on board. It is the Fantasy Football Hustle at Drake Fantasy for me on Twitter. He is at Dwayne McFarland. And you guys, of course, all follow at Graham Barfield. And he's got a new venture out there, fantasypoints.com. So you may have known Graham from his days at NFL.com. You've seen him on the network. Well, now he's doing something special with a guy I'm a big fan of, John Hansen. The first site I ever signed up for to pay for a fantasy site was about 15 years ago when I first discovered fantasy football, and I signed up for fantasyguru.com. And I love anything that Hansen puts out, and I'm a big fan of Joe Dolan. We've had him on the show before, met him in person. And now you're working with those guys again. I've been on the site. Dwayne's been on the site. We're fans of it. Tell us a little bit about how it came to be that you went from NFL.com to now co-owning Fantasy Points.
Sure. So, my first job out of college was with John. I mean, John literally hired me like a couple days before I graduated. I was a finance major in college. And if John had not hired me, I was like definitely going to go into, some sort of entry level banking position or something like that in the finance realm. John hired me. I spent I think 2-3 great seasons with Guru. Loved every bit of it. Got to know Joe and Tom and John, Greg Cosell, Adam Kaplan, all those guys really well. Loved working with them. Got an opportunity to work with the NFL Network for 2 years, and it was a fantastic 2 years. I mean, Marcus Grant, Adam Rank, love those guys. They're going to continue to do great work over there. And I never really, I wasn't really planning on making any moves, but John approached me with this, a couple months ago, and we started putting it together. And it was just kind of one of those things that I was really excited to do, get back to work with John and Joe and all the guys. We brought in Scott Barrett too. Mm-hmm. From Pro Football Focus, who's like just an absolute legend in the fantasy space and has been around, I think, just as long as I have now. But yeah, we're really excited to produce the content, and we've just got such a fantastic team put together.
Absolutely. Anything special that we can look forward to this year? I've talked to Ben Kukanis, the behind the scenes guy, and Joe, and it just seems like you got a lot of good stuff cooking, and these guys got a fire in their belly, man. They're ready to attack.
Oh, you want to talk to somebody who's ready to attack? That's Ben Kukanis. That is our guy. He does a little bit of everything for us. He does social media. He does all of our production on the back end. He's editing. He's just a man. But yeah, we've got Greg Cosell's draft guide up for free, and we're actually going to be updating it with a bunch of new player profilers. I think tomorrow. I think Joe and all the guys were getting those prepared today. So we've got Greg Cosell's draft guide up for free. I'm writing a bunch of yards created stuff. We've got our first run of projections up on the site right now. And we're kind of just hitting the ground running. I mean, we launched 3-4 days before the draft, and we just hit the ground running.
Yeah, I was trying to message Ben frantically before the show. A little behind the scenes stuff here, folks. All these graphics you see on YouTube, which you should be subscribed to our YouTube channel, search Fantasy Football Hustle. Well, a guy in London, 5 Yard Lee, makes these for us. I forgot to ask him this week, so I was reaching out to Ben, and luckily our guy Kevin Tompkins from Fighting Chance Fantasy was around and made our overlay, so we didn't look like a bunch of schmucks this week. So thank you to Kevin. I told him I'd give him a shout out on the air. But what makes you special, Graham, and guys like Dwayne are you've come up with kind of your own your own content, your own package, your own special, unique thing that you can bring place to place to place. Dwayne has a utilization report, and you've got yards created. Tell the folks out there a little bit about how you came up with it, what it is, and then we'll get into it with the rookie running backs for this year.
Sure. I started Yards Created 5 years ago now. Basically was, kind of reading scouting reports like we all do, everybody's articles, everybody's great work. A lot of people were saying, oh, this back can create on his own, or, this running back is a product of his offensive line, or oh, this back is really good at creating forcing missed tackles. But I never really saw a bunch of good data to back up the argument. So really I set out just to chart college running backs and just see what I could find, who is the best at creating yards on their own after the offensive line has or has not done their job, where they're creating their yards, either on inside, outside carries, out of shotgun. It's kind of become more of an all-encompassing type of prospect profile. I kind of try to bring it full circle, especially when we get landing spots for players. I'll usually do a bunch of profiles and try to blend in, their team fit, because landing spot is so important, but also player traits and where they win and where I think they'll succeed. It's been really fun. I never expected to get this big. Matt Harmon was really helping me fine tune. When he was doing reception perception, I reached out to him. He was helping me fine tune the process and helping me how to decide how to chart things. It's become a really cool thing every year, and to see the community support is super humbling every year. I'm always really excited to do it and get the content out.
That's awesome. I know when I see Dwayne, the work he puts into it and how people clamor for it, it's really cool that you guys have come up with these things, and it makes you marketable, and it makes sites obviously want you because you guys are reaching some of the pinnacles of the industry here with Establish the Run and Fantasy Points and NFL.com. And well, let's dig into it now. I feel like Bobby the Brain Heenan here with Mr. Perfect and Andre the Giant. I'm just ready to rock and roll. So Dwayne, fire away here. We've got his, all of Graham's yards created articles in front of us. So let's dig into these rookie running backs.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, honestly, what I love letting people do is really, talk about, a couple of the guys that, you're the most excited about, now that you've talked about the length, you know where they've landed, what the fit looks like. And then, you can kind of lay out a little bit about how you decide, which players you like the most based on where they land and stuff, a little bit about your process. And I would also love to, this is kind of a separate question, Graham, but, I know you're 5 years in now. And so have you really been able to look back at this point and be able to kind of judge, okay, I'm probably really right about this thing mattering, but maybe this, because I come from the background of analytics. So that's the thing I'm always looking for is okay, it's not just what are we measuring, but which things are really the most important? Which things do we keep measuring? Which things maybe are we missing? So as we go, any just tidbits that you've been learning through going through this 5 years, and maybe, how you've maybe tweaked your thought process as you're going. I love hearing that kind of stuff too. And I know our audience does too. Sure.
Absolutely. So first bit, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, everybody's talked about those guys ad nauseum. I mean, Edwards-Helaire is just an unbelievable pass catcher. I mean, I think he's a strong inside runner too. I mean, he actually created more yards per attempt than A.J. Dillon, Cam Akers, Zach Moss too. He's a very, very good inside runner, underrated inside runner, but obviously the calling card there is in the passing game. He's going to absolutely shred with Patrick Mahomes. I think 55, 60 receptions is probably the floor there. Jonathan Taylor, behind arguably the most talented offensive line in the NFL, is another just cake fit. I don't think people are truly in their projections. I don't think they're really baking in how much I think Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines are going to play. Jonathan Taylor's a third-round pick in redraft leagues right now, which is really, really spicy. That's really spicy. I'm taking Edwards-Helaire in the second round just because I think he has, RB1 upside with Reed. My favorite landing spot, though, that I've been obsessed with is J.K. Dobbins with the Ravens. I think he is the clear 103 in rookie dynasty drafts. And, a big part of my process is I think being able to run the ball inside the tackles is one of the most replaceable skills in the NFL. I mean, there are literally probably 65 guys that can do it with all similar skill levels. But J.K. Dobbins, man, he has some just absolute rare burst in athleticism. We didn't get any combine metrics on him because he didn't run, didn't get any pro day numbers on him because of the whole COVID-19 situation. But I think if J.K. Dobbins had gone to the combine, his stock would have skyrocketed, sort of like Jonathan Taylor's did after the combine. I mean, we knew Taylor was fast, but I think J.K. Dobbins would have blown up the combine too. This is just such an awesome fit from a player perspective. He is one of the most well-equipped backs to not only run inside, but I mean, he was well experienced in RPO coming out of Ohio State with Justin Fields back there. And I mean, any running back with Lamar Jackson in the backfield is going to be a cheat code because Lamar is so good at freezing linebackers at the second level. But Dobbins just has such a special talent at the second level because he is just he just has so much burst. I mean, I chart missed tackles by elusiveness and power and speed, and Dobbins passed all three of those with flying colors. Being able to force missed tackles in three different ways just makes you such a versatile player, and so few can actually do it in the way that Dobbins does. So I cannot wait to see J.K. Dobbins shred in that backfield with the Ravens.
Yeah, we had Matt Waldman on a couple of weeks ago, and Drake, and it was right before the draft. Actually, I think it was the Tuesday before the draft, Drake. Yeah. And we were talking to him, okay, who's your favorite running back? The RSP had just come out. And man, he named J.K. Dobbins. And when he gave us his comp, it'll be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on this. You may have already heard Matt's comp for him before, but man, Drake and I were both holy crap, this guy, I was already excited about him, but man, super excited. Matt, he comped him, to Ray Rice. He said he's Ray Rice with better, speed. So, I mean, that's obviously a huge compliment. If you know anything about Matt, he's always been a guy that's like Ray Rice, but he grades him, in Dynasty, he grades Dobbins as his number one. They're all tightly tiered. He's got Dobbins and Taylor and Edwards-Helaire all right there. But yeah, Dobbins is a guy that I think for Dynasty, I probably wouldn't argue with anybody if they actually took him with the first pick. Yeah, you might not get as much out of him this year, but the upside you may have long-term may be even better. He's in a good offense. He's in an offense with a good offensive line, and then the threat of Lamar Jackson obviously always helps and opens up. I mean, we've seen guys like Gus Edwards go nuts, right, in that offense over the last 18 months. So, yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about him. Tell us a little bit about, your thought process. I know I was looking at the rankings earlier on your site for the rookies, and I won't give any of the other folks' ranks away, but there's a guy that you didn't, I'm not saying you had him ranked high, but you had him ranked higher than the rest of the guys on fantasy points, and that was Anthony McFarland. And this is a guy that when we had Matt Waldman on, he was really low on McFarland. He felt that if he went to the right scheme, he still might be a guy that would develop. But tell us about what you saw with McFarland whenever you broke him down.
Yeah, Anthony McFarland led the class in yards created per attempt. He is an insanely explosive player. Maryland used him in kind of a bit role, a lot of his carries went off tackle. I think he led the class in off tackle carry rate. They kind of used him in this kind of gap pull scheme where they would motion him across the formation and kind of pull blockers to one side to try to get him off tackle and get him into space. So I think a little bit of his touches were manufactured in a certain sense, but I think that's simply because Maryland had nothing on offense. They had to get the ball to McFarland in space because he was their best player. Split carries with Javon Leak, who ended up being at UDFA. The concerns for McFarland are pretty simple. I think he's a very explosive player, but he might just be a complementary piece in the Steelers offense. But look, James Conner has not been able to stay healthy the last couple of years, and he's not necessarily been super efficient on his touches when he is healthy. This is now the third straight year the Steelers have invested not super heavily, but heavily enough into a running back. They've taken McFarland, Snell, and Jalen Samuels in 3 straight drafts. I just think, Conner's in his final year of his deal. I think McFarland has a legitimate chance to see a floor of 6 to 10 touches per game to start the year. And he could end up being their most effective and efficient back because he was so underutilized as a pass catcher at Maryland. Only caught 17 balls, but when he did catch the ball, he had a clear ability, I think, to create in his own in space. It's interesting that Waldman's lower on him. I respect his opinion. Greg Cosell actually went back and rewatched McFarland after the draft, and it sounded like he loved him. He sounded like he really liked his inside running ability, which made me a little bit even higher on him. So I like Anthony McFarland quite a bit as a player. I love the landing spot, and I have him at RB7 after Keyshawn Vaughn. I think Vaughn has a lot of upside, obviously, in the Bucs offense, especially if he gets a true 3-down role, which I think he can do. But McFarland for rookie dynasty drafts goes off the board like almost a full round later. And I think he has not the same upside, but maybe 75% of Vaughn's ceiling. And that's a pretty strong arbitrage play at a later pick.
Yeah, I was going to mention Keyshawn Vaughn next. You guys over at Fantasy Points earlier in the week did a rookie, like a 2-round mock or something. You had a bunch, Hanson, Dolan, Barrett, all the guys on there. And Keyshawn Vaughn was a guy that went middle of the first round. I just did a dynasty draft with rookies, and I got him at the 110, and I was ecstatic for it, but I was also scared out of my mind because he just, to me, seems like a guy who, they got him in the 3rd round, and has Arians had success with 3rd-round running backs before? Yes, we all know he has, but he seems very replaceable to me. He seems like a guy that, you're not going to be super excited about. Next year they could go like, all right, we got to get somebody else in here. But for right now, the landing spot and who he's got to beat out in Ronald Jones, it's like it's all set up for him. Why can't this guy explode?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Vaughn is one of those guys. He does everything all right. He doesn't have one standout trait. I think he's got a little more burst than people give him credit for. Vanderbilt's offensive line did not open up a lot of big holes. He was contacted at the line behind the line of scrimmage, like almost at the same rate as Cam Akers, just behind. I mean, and everybody knows Cam Akers' offensive line was terrible. But yeah, I mean, Vaughn is a fine pass catcher. He's a fine pass blocker. He's one of those guys that just he gets the yards that you expect him to get. He was second in the class in yards created per attempt, but I think a little bit of that was simply because he had just a bunch of kind of longer runs that kind of skewed it. He definitely is more of a sustaining back for sure. But I'm kind of with you. Like Vaughn goes at like 110, 111 in rookie dynasty drafts, and for me, like I prefer the receivers. I prefer Jalen Reagor for sure over Keyshawn. Jalen Reagor is my wide receiver 1, so I shouldn't even start there. But like, I prefer all the receivers: CeeDee Lamb, Reagor. I prefer Pittman over him. If it's a super flex league, I at least want 3 quarterbacks before I take Vaughn.
I traded up to get the next pick. Take Michael Pittman, by the way.
Nice. I've got quite a bit
between the two.
Yeah, I've got quite a bit of Pittman. But no, I think that the play on Vaughn this year for fantasy, at least, is like if he's going to be the 106 to 110 in dynasty drafts, I'm more than likely going to prefer the receiver. But I've been doing a bunch of best balls here to kind of get things going, and he's going in like the 5th, 6th, 7th round sometimes in redraft, and I think that's kind of the right price range for him, right? Because like after the first couple rounds in redraft leagues this year, running back really falls apart. It's very hard to find upside, and Vaughn certainly has upside on the 6th and 7th round. So price wise, I'm kind of out for rookie dynasty drafts on Vaughn. I like the landing spot, obviously, but he's going now in a range where it's almost like I would prefer just to have the receiver because their window for fantasy points is so much longer naturally because they don't age as quickly. And like you mentioned, Tom Brady might not be in Tampa Bay after this season. It might just be a 1-year type of thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm the same way on Vaughn. I have the same thought process. I'm scared of him in that range in the dynasty, but I think you're right. In a redraft, that makes sense. You're at that spot where the risk versus the reward, starts to level out based on who else is still left on the board. So I think that's a good thought process. One other guy I know that a lot of folks were not excited about his landing spot. But coming into the draft was one of the guys that many people thought was the most complete back. What are your thoughts on DeAndre Swift and him landing with the Lions?
Oh man, I loved the player. I almost ranked him at RB1. I thought as I went through my process, pre-draft, I should have said I almost ranked him as my pre-draft RB1. As I went through the process, I knew Jonathan Taylor would probably be the RB1. Just very good yards created metrics, as you expect. Didn't get as much benefit behind his offensive line as people give him credit, as people try to think that he did. But DeAndre Swift, like, is borderline elite at every single trait. Like, was a sustaining runner, created over 5 or more yards on 34% of his carries. That's like top 8 in my database all time, and up there with like guys like Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, just insanely creative runners. Loved him, obviously, as a receiver. He caught like 70 balls in college, which in today's college football, that's incredible production. But the landing spot is just brutal. I mean, it's absolutely brutal. I don't want to have like a short-term view in Dynasty, but Darrell Bevell has never been one to throw to his running backs. He's never been a coach that wants to throw to his running backs. And I think the Lions have been searching for another back to add to Kerryon Johnson to be kind of a committee there. So for fantasy production this year, I have a hard time projecting Swift for anything more than like 210 touches, with Kerryon Johnson probably around 150 somewhere. It's just, it comes down to how good do we think this Lions offense is going to be.
Right. Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise anybody if those numbers were flipped and Kerryon had more than Swift. I mean, it could really go any way. And then you have Matt Patricia, who continues to say he wants to involve multiple backs. You know, he even said that right after the draft. Their GM was on, as well, saying the same kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm with you. It's like, man, when that, for the most part, like the draft went pretty well with landing spots overall, in my opinion. Like, it actually felt a little better than normal because I felt like, a year or 2 years ago, I mean, there were just so many like that were the spots where I was like, oh man, that really sucks. But this was definitely one. The DeAndre Swift, I was like, I did not want him to go to the Lions. I totally understood why they wanted him, but yeah, I was hoping for a better spot. Well, before we move on, from the backs, just, 2 quick things. One, is there anybody else that you want to chat about that you feel like, our listeners should really, even if it's a guy that's a little bit further down your list, maybe you end up liking him a little more now because of the landing spot? And then just the other thing, is there anything, like I was saying, now that you're looking back and you can actually go back and see, okay, here are the things that I graded about these backs in the past, whenever they've had these sort of things and maybe been drafted in the first couple of rounds, this has been their kind of hit rate. Are there certain traits that you're measuring that really, now that you're able to look back, you can actually say, hey, this might have some predictive capacity to it? Obviously, the sample size is still small, but you're excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest things that I've been tracking, I mean, just off the top, is simply yards created per attempt. I mean, if you go back through, and we're working on fantasypoints.com to get the full database up so everybody can have access to this data, all of our subscribers can, but like, I mean, it's the main offering and it's the most predictive. I mean, Joe Mixon, Kenyon Drake, Saquon Barkley, Darrell Henderson were all, at the top 4. Zeke was 5th in yards created per attempt all time. McFarland was actually 6th. Fournette was up at the top, RIP to Leonard Fournette. But Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, Christian McCaffrey, all these guys, Dalvin Cook, are all top 14, top 15 all time in yards created per attempt. And all of them were consistently creating yards on their carries. Like, I go and look at like how many times they were creating 5 or more yards. For fantasy though, like in just in terms of like raw projection and projecting future stats, one of the things that bothers me about the running backs don't matter debate is that, yes, obviously we've been talking about this since 2015. Running the ball inside the tackles is replaceable. This has been verified countless times. We do not have to have this debate any longer, but running backs' ability in the passing game is absolutely a skill that matters. Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Clyde Edwards-Helaire are 3 of the best pass-catching running backs I've ever seen. All 3 of them have just had an incredible, in college, had a projectable and incredible way of creating space and separation against linebackers. Like that is a skill that immediately translates to the next level. And look, I'm not smart enough to know how to best quantify how a player separates. Next Gen Stats is trying to do it with data and player tracking and lasers, and that's freaking awesome. I mean, like, they're not all the way there yet, but they're getting closer. I'd like to see that happen on a per play basis. I know Pro Football Focus is trying at it, and nobody's really been able to put their finger on it. And again, I'm not smart enough to do it, but I think like a running back's ability to create on his own after the catch on passing downs is like, it's just such a translatable skill. And I mean, I've now been seeing it I've been lucky enough to, I mean, Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara were two of my favorite running backs I've ever charted. Kamara, I was a little shaky on just because he was never truly like a featured back at Tennessee and like just had a really small sample of carries, but he was an incredible receiver. So if I've learned anything over the last couple of years, it's yes, running the ball in between the tackles in the NFL, it doesn't matter. That does not matter. That does not win you games. But a running back's ability to create on his own and create space against linebackers in the NFL and man-to-man coverage is going to make your offense more difficult to defend. It's just simply will. And that's one thing that I'm really hoping we can find a way to quantify this just a little bit better.
Yeah, I think Jay Moyer at Jay Moyer FB on Twitter. He does a lot of great videos. I think you guys follow each other. But he and I actually did an article last year for the RSP that was about what you're talking about. We did it to the best of our ability with the data, like you said, that we have. But we broke down all the running backs you're talking about and, what it brings, to an offense, what that means for the defense when they're having to think about, that, extra facet, right, of another team's offense. But yeah, I'm totally with you. I'm glad that you brought that up. Any other guys though, you just want to give a quick mention before we move on and talk about receivers and some other stuff? Let Drake carry us in some other direction here. I never know where he's going to go. It's probably something to do with the freaking Eagles, but
we're going to talk Jalen Reagor, so get ready.
Oh, we can talk Reagor. No, one thing I've noticed is like, in the fantasy community, in our little bubble on Twitter, like players start getting really hyped up, and like Antonio Gibson is a guy that's getting really, really hyped up.
Yes. Thank you. I was going to ask you about him.
It's for the right
Who cares
reasons.
About this guy?
I mean, it's for the right reasons. Like the limited touches that we had of him last year. I mean, he only got like the ball 75 times or something like that at Memphis. He was explosive. I mean, I charted all of his carries. He would have been number one in the class over Clyde Edwards-Helaire in missed tackles forced per carry. But I've been really, I don't know. He's been the running back that I think everybody's kind of put their coin on to be like the underrated guy. And now he's getting to a point where he's getting too pricey in Dynasty. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he could catch 30, 40 balls this year for sure. But are we going to really project him to have a rushing role? I know Greg Cosell, who is like my favorite film analyst, he mentioned on a podcast on our Fantasy Points podcast last week that he didn't even know if Gibson was a back. He thought he was more of a slot wide receiver. I guess my thing is just like pump the brakes a little bit on calling Gibson the next David Johnson, because that's doing a disservice to David Johnson, the player. Mm-hmm. David Johnson carried Northern Iowa's run offense in college, and I get it, totally different team and player conference, but he's not on the same level as David Johnson as a runner was coming out.
What do you know? Some small guy comes out of Memphis and gets overhyped in fantasy drafts. Where have I seen this before?
Hey, don't slight Darrell Henderson that way.
So if you guys are interested in all of the first round fantasy relevant players, again, go to our YouTube page. Dwayne and I broke them down as it happened during the draft. It was pretty fun. So search Fantasy Football Hustle on YouTube and you'll be able to see everything we did there. So let's transition now over to the wide receivers. And it's interesting because Dwayne and I, like I said, we're doing the draft live here, and Jalen Reagor gets picked by the Eagles. And I'm kind of still in just, shell shocked that CeeDee Lamb isn't an Eagle and all. And Dwayne kind of drops on me. He goes, I think he's like my number one wide receiver in terms of landing spot. And I didn't expect him to say that. And then now you've followed it up in the recent weeks with the same thing. So something's got to be going well for my birds here if two smart guys like you are on it. So why do you love him so much besides the fact that every other receiver on the team is dead?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that's a part of it, but it's not the main part. It's not even really like one of the first 3 or 4 parts that I love Jalen Reagor. I was pretty high on Reagor before the draft. I had him, I think it maybe 3 or 4. I don't know. I'm terrible at receiver rankings, honestly. Like I'm not a receiver evaluator. I stay in my lane. I've missed way too many wide receivers in the past, but I loved Reagor. Greg Cosell loved Reagor. Said he had like borderline elite separation skills on tape. They moved him all over the field, Cosell said at TCU. Then he goes to the combine and posts. Like, look, individual wide receiver metrics, you're never going to find positive correlation to fantasy points. You never will. But on the whole, I think athleticism matters in athletics. I just don't. I think that's a verifiable fact. And Reagor is an incredible athlete. I mean, if you look at like baselines, Rager checks every box. He ran, in the 4.4s, jumped out of the building in Indy. I think he had the best broad and vert jumps, or he was top 2 or 3. I mean, it was like 99th percentile all time. He's an incredible athlete, broke out super young, entered the NFL draft early, which Rich Rebar said was super predictive of fantasy success. Wrote a great article over it on Sharp Football. Like, Rager checks every box that we look for. And now he's landed in a spot with the Eagles and Carson Wentz, who wants to be aggressive, throwing the ball downfield. And they don't have any receivers. I mean, Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson are both over 30 years old now, both coming off major injuries. I just think Rager has such a easy pathway to get at least 80 to 90 targets just walking in the door as a rookie, and has the upside for much more if he's as good of a player as some people think he is.
Now, Henry Ruggs went off the board early to the Las Vegas Raiders, and I was having a conversation with Sigmund Bloom and some other guys today, mostly around Darren Waller. But one of the guys was asking, he goes, well, do you think, Waller's going to get all these targets again? And Bloom had a great point of, you don't draft a guy like Ruggs that high and you're not scheming up plays for him. That's what Gruden does. He wants to get the ball in his hand around the line of scrimmage, let this kid run. But I'm not seeing a lot of fantasy analysts out there being overly high on Ruggs. I think people maybe had this illusion that he was this down the field huge threat, but really he's a guy, if you can bubble screen him all day, like, he's going to light it up. And I think that's maybe what the Raiders want to do.
Yeah, I think there's been a misconception that Henry Ruggs is like this incredible deep threat. I mean, he's definitely really fast. He has unbelievable start-stop acceleration, just incredible. But he was arguably the third best receiver on that team. I mean, Jerry Jeudy, I thought, was just by far and away a better prospect. And they've got that kid, Jalen Waddle, who's going to be a freak too in the NFL. But look, for me, for fantasy, like my problem with Ruggs is, like, sure, they're going to scheme looks for him. They definitely have a plan for Ruggs. You don't take a player that high without a plan in place, especially a player of Ruggs' archetype. Gruden's been watching Tyreek Hill burn his secondary for 2 straight years, and he probably wants his own version of Tyreek Hill. But the problem is Henry Ruggs ain't Tyreek Hill, and John Gruden ain't Andy Reid. I liked Henry Ruggs as a player a little bit more than a lot of the people in the analytics community did. Like I said, I mean, I'm not charting wide receivers like I am running backs, but I thought he had better separation skills, especially at the intermediate level, than some people gave him credit for. But the landing spot for me is just as bad as it could get. Derek Carr does not throw the ball deep. Derek Carr is not an aggressive quarterback. Last 2 years, Derek Carr has finished third from last in average depth of target downfield. And Marcus Mariota is even more conservative. So for me, like, if we wanted Henry Ruggs to kind of be the splash play, deep threat type guy, he went to the worst quarterback room possible with a coach who I think John Gruden called a couple nice games last year, but the jury is still out on John Gruden as a play caller in his second run here in the NFL.
What about Dwayne's team there, CeeDee Lamb? Obviously, every Eagles fan is heartbroken, but we have to move on from that. And he is a guy who I said when he was drafted, within 2 years, he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver on the Dallas Cowboys. Not only does this make Dak Prescott, 20 times richer in a year when he signs this contract, but Lamb's just a really good player. 6'3". I know Cosell wasn't as high on him as a lot of other people, but you put him in that offense. He's kind of going to be hidden this year. Boy, I don't know for fantasy, though, and that's why you guys are here. Where do you slot this guy in maybe a redraft league? Because there's a lot of Cowboys fans out there. You know that in America. You're going to be in your home league, and these guys love taking Dak. They love taking Zeke. They put the star on the helmet, and let's go. This guy's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So where does Lamb fit in, maybe in more of a redraft mindset for 2020?
Yeah, we've been going through our staff projections. I've been doing best ball ranks, and I am a little bit higher on CeeDee Lamb in redraft than I think consensus will be. I just think he's that damn good. They're going to line him up in the slot. They're going to tell him to run after the catch, and he's going to be a total freak because those interior DBs aren't going to be able to. They're not going to be able to cover him. I think this move just makes the Cowboys so multiple. I mean, they gave Jason Witten and Randall Cobb like over 150 targets last year. Those were dead targets. Now they're going to be funneled all to Gallup, Cooper, and Lamb, and I just think Lamb has such a high ceiling. I agree. I think he could be the best. I don't think it's a stretch to say at all that he's probably going to be the Cowboys' best receiver in 2 years. Just total freak show. Great after the catch. He just has such a knack on tape for making defenders miss. I mean, just like freakish ability to make guys miss. I can't wait to see him in one-on-one coverage against slot corners because he's going to make them look stupid.
I can wait.
Hey, at least the Eagles. Hey, look at the bright side, Brian. The Eagles actually have some good corners now, so at least he does have talent.
Roby Coleman, get your shoes tied tight, man, because you're going to be in the slot, chasing him around all season long. And we'll get into our 4-hour schedule release party is coming in a moment here. Dwayne, what are some wide receivers out there that you like?
Oh man. Well, I guess one to talk about, is Justin Jefferson. We know that, Stephon Diggs moves on, to be with the Bills. Jefferson, you do hear some of the community talk about, well, he only played in the slot at LSU. And I'm one of these guys that I don't necessarily fault a player for where he had to play in college. That's where his coaches wanted him. And then he executed and he did really well there. And so we know he can do well there. Was he as good working outside, in the years before? No, but he also didn't have this version of Joe Burrow that he got to play with this past year. So for me, I like Justin Jefferson. I'm a little leery of the landing spot just because they definitely want to be a run first team. So if you're thinking Dynasty, you're not worrying about that as much, right? Because the coaches and stuff, you just don't know what for sure is going to happen. Those things could change. But, in redraft, I definitely think Thielen is the one. I think Irv Smith has a chance to battle to be the number 2. But I just want to get your thoughts, Graham, on Jefferson. If you have Irv Smith thoughts as well, we love Irv Smith on this show. But just your thoughts on him playing on the outside and potentially his fit, in this Gary Kubiak, which is kind of like the Kyle Shanahan type offense.
Yeah, huge on Irv Smith. I own either
yes.
him or yeah.
I have another Irv Smith lover. Yes, I've been waiting, Graham. Man. You're invited back already.
That dude can play. I mean, tight ends don't really usually do anything, but the fact that he caught, I think 36 balls and he was barely 21 years old last year. He is so much better than Kyle Rudolph. It was out snapping him too at the end of last year. I don't know if people know that too.
Yep.
But my thing with Justin Jefferson is really twofold. LSU ran strictly a 3 wide receiver and 4 wide receiver offense. They went empty a lot, and Justin Jefferson still stayed in the slot. To me, Joe Brady, I mean, look, when you got Jamar Chase on the outside, that changes the complexion of the offense, right? I mean, Jamar Chase is going to be a top 15 pick in the NFL. He's probably already a better prospect than Justin Jefferson is. And that's fine. That's not belittling Jefferson at all. Jamar Chase, I think, is that good. That being said, though, it does bother me a little bit that they didn't, even when they went empty, Jefferson stayed in the slot. And to me, LSU was a very, very sharply run offense last year. I mean, they were one of the most pass-heavy teams in the league. In college football, Joe Burrow was probably the most accurate quarterback that we've seen come out of the NFL, at least in the last couple of years, maybe in the last 10 to 20. I think Jefferson, there's a little bit to say that Jefferson might have been a product of that LSU offense. I know Scott Barrett and I were both a little bit lower on him coming out. And now going to the Vikings, it's kind of like a scheme redundancy. Thielen and Jefferson are probably both best suited as slot receivers. Thielen's obviously coming off the hamstring injury, should be healthy, and I think he's their clear number 1 wide receiver. Stephon Diggs got fewer than 100 targets last year, and I don't see how Justin Jefferson eclipses Diggs' target share, especially in a year where Adam Thielen basically was never healthy, and Diggs still didn't command 100 targets. Vikings are going to want to run the ball and basically are never an 11 personnel. They are strictly a 12 personnel team, and I think that will continue with Rudolph and Irv Smith. So, look, you don't take Justin Jefferson in the second round or in the first round at 22 overall without a plan in place. And Rick Spielman obviously thinks he can win outside, and I'm not going to discredit a GM, obviously, but I do have a little bit of concerns that 1, the volume won't be there, and 2, I'm not sure, just because we haven't seen it, doesn't mean he can't do it, but I'm a little bit concerned that Jefferson just was a slot player at LSU's obviously highly, highly schemed offense.
Yeah, and I've heard that, so I think it's definitely fair. I guess my thought process on it, and I've tried to go back and read everything I can, like from Joe Brady and from the coaching staff and LSU. And not that they would, but I just couldn't ever really find anything saying, hey, here's why we had to play Jefferson, inside. It's just they felt they deployed their resources the best way. And there are some other really good players, on that team. So it will be interesting. I do like the scheme that he's in, because really it's in that scheme, it's really more like you have two Z's versus, an X and a Z. If you think about the route combinations that they run, it's like I said, it's the Kyle Shanahan, Gary Kubiak style, offense, a lot of play action, crossers and posts and things like that. And, a lot of underneath stuff. So we'll have to see. I think he can do a lot of those things really well, but I'm with you. I do worry about the volume. And, we can definitely just one more time say that we love Irv Smith. So, hey, another guy I definitely want to hear about, because I think I'm probably higher than most on this guy. And I will say, when we had Waldman on, this was his number 2 guy pre-draft out of everybody, and it's Denzel Mims. So tell us what your thoughts are on Denzel Mims, a guy that right now he's, he might fit in this. Potentially, he has the upside to be one of these other top tier guys in a couple of years from now. But right now, he's clearly being drafted outside of that, in Dynasty.
Yeah, obviously Mims is just a total freak show. I mean, just blew up the combine, obviously. I mean, everybody is going to be attached to those combine metrics. But obviously was, a big producer at Baylor, too. Broke out at 20 years old. We always look for, receivers that break out early in college. My biggest concern with Denzel Mims is not him as a player at all. I mean, I think he's profiles perfectly as like a great boundary receiver in the NFL. It just comes down to Adam Gase. And I mean, everything that we've seen out of Adam Gase in his NFL head coaching career and offensive coordinating career, when he doesn't have Peyton Manning, I mean, the dude is one of the worst coaches in the NFL in terms of like not only just play calling and just like all of that, but I mean, all of his efficiency metrics and yardage metrics are terrible.
He's a definite Debbie Downer.
Yeah. And I mean, and another thing that concerns me.
Hey, Frank Gore said he specifically signed there because he likes Adam Gase. Come on, Graham.
He has Frank Gore, the name that cannot be spoken on this show. Frank Gore screwed me year after year after year. We curse his name on this show.
Well, now he's going to screw Le'Veon Bell out of like 100. But no, I mean, my concern is like Adam Gase has not proven himself as an NFL play caller, and he obviously was high enough on him to draft him, but. Next year, I don't know if Adam Gase is going to be the coach of the Jets. I mean, Denzel Mims we could be looking at a situation where we have a guy who came out and after his senior year, he was a 4-year prospect, didn't come out early, really kind of shot up the draft boards. I think shut up the hype draft boards pre-draft because of the combine, then fell in the draft. I mean, I bet Denzel Mims to go in the first round. I had a prop bet on him to go first round, and I lost money on that. I mean, I thought Mims was really genuinely shooting into the first round, and he fell all the way into the 50s. That's a little bit concerning to me. And another concern, too, is like I can't make sense of this, and this could just be a part of the Baylor offense because they don't really run a real offense. They just kind of run spread and just do a bunch of crazy shit. But, like, Denzel Mims didn't see any screens. Like, he never saw a screen. And to me, like, I don't think Denzel Mims flashed elite separation skills on tape in the way that Jalen Reagor did, or in the way that Jerry Jeudy did, or even in the way CeeDee Lamb did. Like, even though CeeDee Lamb's not in the same conversation, I think, as Jeudy as a route runner right now. I didn't really see Mims creating all the separation that those guys did. So I liked Denzel Mims, the player. I wouldn't have him at wide receiver 2. I think I had him in my top 6 or 7, but this landing spot definitely has me lower on him. I think the Jets are just going to be super multiple. They're going to throw to Perriman. They're going to throw to Herndon. They'll throw to Crowder. They'll throw to Mims a little bit. They're going to spread the wealth.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I like is he still does have a young quarterback, and there's not another dominant player there, right? Yeah, I do think that out of the gate, they're going to run a 10-11. They did that last year. They'll spread the ball around. But I think when I look at the rest of the roster, there's an opportunity for Mims to separate, right? Some from those guys. But I'm totally with you on the Adam Gase thing. Major Debbie Downer. But I see Mims out of the gate right away, and they're starting 3 receiver sets, and they'll probably be in 11, 75 to 80% of the time. So I think that's the positives for him. Drake, any other receivers that you want to ask about, or Graham, any guys that you just, I mean, I could go on and on about receivers, but if there's
anybody, Dwayne, I want to get your take real quick on, because these are two guys that I have outside, just right inside my top 12. I've got Bryan Edwards at 10 and Laviska Chennault at 11. And I have literally no idea what to do with Laviska Chennault. So what are your thoughts on him and his landing spot?
My God.
Yeah. I actually like Chennault. I think, obviously the quarterback situation, I thought Minshew was okay last year. I mean, he's a functional NFL quarterback, but he's still young, so he could get better. And I do like the fact that now you've got, Jay Gruden there. So you're going to see a ton of 11. Yep. I think from everything I've read so far in the press conference stuff, they see him playing their Z role. So he's going to be running more of the, underneath catch and run, type stuff. And based on, now I didn't watch him near as much as like a Cosell or a Waldman. That's why I love reading their stuff, and other guys like you. From what I saw from him, man, that's a perfect fit really for his skill set. And you still have DJ Chark on the other side, who really broke out last year and is a guy that can stretch the field. So defenses at least, have to respect that. And then I think when we think about D.D. Westbrook, he's a guy that I think has kind of been given his chance to have some volume, and he's just kind of been meh with it. So I feel like as soon as this year, Chennault could be really pushing for you, if he stays healthy, for being the number 2 guy in that offense that's going to throw the ball, probably 59% of the time, because they're probably going to be trailing as well. Jay Gruden he's a little more balanced than what people realize. A lot of people think, oh, no, he's like 70% throw. No, he's like, if he can, he will still try to, run the ball in normal run situations. He's not truly like this evolutionary pushing the edge passing coach. He does pass more than some traditional coaches that we may think of, but I like his scheme. And so I like Chenault's fit, there. And so for me, Chennault, hang on, let me look at my list right now. I've got him at number 7, but I'm with you. Like when I look at my rankings right now, like they're just not hard, like more for Dynasty, they probably are. But like when I think about redraft, they're definitely not hard baked yet. Like it's kind of marinating, you know what I mean? Yep. And as we get more information, we get more data points. Hopefully we get training camp and some of the other things, where we can go back and watch for specific things, not necessarily playing time, but there may be certain things we want to see that they can overcome. But yeah, I like Chennault. And when you look at his body type, if he's just been unlucky with injuries, which is totally possible, man, when you look at his size and you look at his athleticism, I mean, he has a lot of things that scream, man, he could be a top 15 wide receiver, eventually. Yeah. So I like him.
Yeah. I mean, to me, when I saw him, it just screamed like he's a souped up Deebo Samuel, Yeah. Like just like basically running back in a wide receiver's body. And I'm with you. The landing spot is interesting. My only concern for fantasy is like, I think DJ Chark is going to command a ton of volume as their exercise.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're going to move Chennault as the flanker Z type. They'll get Westbrook in the slot. Gruden loves to throw to his running backs. He's going to check it down to Thompson. I think they're going to line up Chennault as a running back sometimes too.
I bet so.
And use him that way too. Really, to me, I think for like rookie year fantasy, I think Chennault is like, probably going to be like a boomer bust wide receiver 4. But his draft pick and the Chris Thompson signing, I want no part of Leonard Fournette this year. Like literally no part. Dude caught 76 balls last year. Would you be surprised if he caught 40, like just 40 this year?
I would, if you were like making me like put money on it right now. Yeah. I don't see any way I could say he would catch over 40.
How do you even keep him on the team at this point?
Well, they want to move him. They just haven't
shopping him basically for anybody who will take him for a conditional 7th round pick, and nobody wants him right now. But Chris Thompson's a guy that
Doug
Marone, he can be really valuable. Doug Marone's a moron. Trust me.
Is he our next Adam Gase? Like it's to the point now where I'm like, how does Doug Marone still have a job?
Honestly, look, I went to middle school, high school, and college in the Jacksonville area. I know the Jacksonville team, the Jaguars, pretty well. Have no idea how Dave Caldwell has a job. I mean, the fact that Doug Marone has a job is one thing, but the fact that Dave Caldwell has somehow, I don't know, found his way to weasel his way into keeping his job is crazy.
With a guy leading the team that actually loves analytics and all these other things, that seems to be like at least comes off as a forward-thinking owner. right? I don't know. Yeah,
I can't make sense of it either.
Yeah, Tony Khan's busy down there running AEW, and he's got to tell his dad.
Well, Tony Khan's running the Fulham team too, and they just got relegated years ago in the Premier League. So,
didn't you do some sort of fantasy football thing against Cody Rhodes and AEW guys?
Yeah, I did. So last year for the NFL Network, we did the show. Adam Rank was the commissioner, and he was the host of the show. But we did like a celebrity. It was called Fantasy League One, and Cody Rhodes and Brandy Rhodes, his running mate on the AEW, was they did a show. They were like two of the nicest people I've ever met. Like, they get in the ring and they look all fierce and stuff, but like they were really, really nice and good at fantasy too. That was really cool. They drafted Mark Ingram in the 4th round. That was like one of the sharpest pick in the draft. So I was immediately friends with them.
That's awesome. And you guys, you're getting ready for drafts out there. It may be early May, but best ball season's here. Redraft right around the corner. We're going to be talking camp, cross our fingers and, say a prayer, light a candle. But if you want to get into draft talk, and that's really when fantasy starts cruising here on the Hustle, we are going to look at a draft that Graham did this week for the NFFC. This was a best ball draft. He had the 5th pick. We're not going to bore you and go through his whole team and all that, but we're just going to kind of cherry pick some points in the draft and kind of get for redraft also his mindset for 2020. And Graham, first and foremost, and you said it during the live stream, you got to be in the running back business because holy smokes, they're gone in a hurry.
Oh my gosh, man. This year, and especially in best ball leagues, just because you have no weekly management, obviously with no waiver wire, running backs fly off the board. I wrote an article, a really quick article this morning about the best ball draft review. And I noted in it that I think it was 20 of the first 36 picks. I know 14 of the first 20 were running backs, but I think it was 20 of the first 36 were all running backs. And in redraft leagues, I think that'll skew just a little bit more towards wide receivers. But the general point is running back falls off a cliff after the 4th round, maybe even in the late 3rd round. I mean, after Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley, Jonathan Taylor, RB 17, RB 18 are off the board. Running back just completely falls off a cliff this year. It just kind of immediately nosedives into guys that we really don't have a great projection for. I think in best ball leagues, especially, I'm going to be looking to draft 2 to 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds because 1, running back scarcity, and 2, wide receiver this year is absurd. I mean, it is so deep this year. I love Terry McLaurin. I've been trying to get him everywhere in Dynasty, and I will be drafting him in nearly every single one of my redraft leagues this year because he is a 6th round pick, and there's a legitimate chance that he doubles up everybody on that Redskins team in targets this year. DJ Chark's a 6th round pick. Deontay Johnson, who I absolutely love as a sleeper, is 8th, 9th round pick. I mean, you can draft legitimate weekly impact players at wide receiver pretty much all throughout rounds 3 to 11. And you just simply cannot do that with running backs this year. There's some upside in Keyshawn Vaughn and some J.K. Dobbins guys like that. And Chris Carson goes in the 4th round or so. But outside of the first, 36 picks at running back is really, really brutal this year.
And what's interesting is that was even in a format like this. You were in the NFFC, if I'm remembering correctly, which is you have to start 3 wide receivers. I mean, you have a flex, but I mean, even in that kind of format where everybody's got to have at least 3 starting wide receivers, it was still super heavy, on the runners up front.
Yeah, I mean, I all of these guys have been doing, these high stakes best ball leagues. This was a high stakes league, a lot more than I have. This is my first one of the year. And they all obviously put a huge premium on running backs. I was lucky enough to get 2 in the first 2 rounds. I think I took Dalvin Cook and Kenya Drake. I was pretty happy with that. But yeah, I mean, you can draft awesome wide receivers pretty much throughout the whole draft board this year. And for redraft leagues, I think that's going to be the same.
Yeah,
man. Oh, sorry, Drake. Go ahead.
I'm just going to point out, say you're one of our listeners out there, and you really want to hammer running back. There was a team here that drafted from the 9 hole. They went running back, running back, running back, running back to start. They went 4 straight running backs. Okay. Their wide receivers, again, you start 3, were still Deebo Samuel, DJ Chark, and Brashad Perriman. They started 4 straight running backs. That's still a good wide receiver group.
It is, especially in best ball. I mean, DJ Chark is going to have some monster games, but he's going to also have like some games where he catches like 2 balls for 30 yards. Deebo Samuel will be the same way too, especially with the Niners. But man, I mean, you can theoretically, like this year, I've done maybe just a dozen best ball drafts or so. But if you're picking out of the second or third spot, you can start your drafts with a version of Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, one of those two with the first 2 picks. First 2 to 3 picks, and then you can get Clyde Edwards-Helaire and bring it back with like Melvin Gordon, Lev Bell, depending on how you feel about him now. Todd Gurley. I mean, there is a way to do like just a super robust team, super robust running back team, and then just hammer wide receivers all throughout the mid rounds. And honestly, in best ball this year, I think that's pretty much what most people are going to be doing, especially when they have a top 5 pick.
Yeah, I'm all over Smith-Schuster in the 4th.
Oh, baby.
I'm like, man, it's insane. This is recency bias at its best. Like,
he was going to the end of the first last year.
Yeah, you lose Ben Roethlisberger, and Smith-Schuster got hurt in game 1. I mean, he played for the games he did play. He was pretty much hurt the whole time. You got a quarterback named Duck. So, I mean, dude, Smith-Schuster in the 4th. I mean, a guy that's still, what is he, 23 years old, and what we've already seen this guy do. Yeah. I'm like just salivating. Thielen, I love Thielen in the 4th. Like, if people are going to give me Thielen, I would love, to start with 3 runners and know that I can get Thielen or Juju Smith-Schuster in the 4th. And then, like you said, there's still a guy like McLaurin I could get at the end of the 5th or at the beginning of the 6th. Yeah. It's crazy.
I was shocked. Obviously, it was a very running back heavy room, and a few running backs went a little bit earlier than I expected, but I was shocked that Juju lasted until the 5th pick of the 4th round. I mean, my God, if that price stays the same, I cannot imagine being more overweight. I cannot imagine being more overweight on Juju Smith-Schuster.
I was just going to say, I mean, me, like, I mean, I draft a ton of teams, and I could easily be like, doing a like this sad poor me by week 3 if like Juju Smith-Schuster's hurt and like I have like 70% of my teams are sunk.
I know. Last year was just the worst. It was the worst possible situation for him, right? Because Big Ben's arm, his arm disintegrated after week 1. Then Juju was hurt for most of the year, and he had, Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges formed easily the worst quarterback room in the NFL, and it's not close. Like, Kyle Allen was bad. Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodgins redefined Kyle Allen bad. Juju is he's going to be back in the slot this year. He's going to be back in his natural slot role because for whatever reason they love Chase. Look, Steelers know how to draft wide receivers. I'm not going to hate on the Chase Claypool pick. A lot of smart people did not think Claypool could win outside. The Steelers think they're wrong. They're going to play Claypool and Deontay Johnson outside and move Juju into the slot. And for us, if Juju's their slot receiver 55, 60% of the time, and he's a 4th round pick in PPR leagues, oh my God.
He'll be the Z in the slot, and I love it. And you know what, Deontay Johnson, what he did with those quarterbacks last year and being a rookie, think like, what did he have? He had over like, I don't even have it in front of me, but I want to say he had like 650 or something yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns with those 2 quarterbacks as a rookie.
Yeah. I went back and watched at the end of last year. Deontay Johnson was just white hot. I mean, he was a full-time player for them. He ended the year with, I think, like 250 or so yards in the final 4 games. And that dude was getting open at will. Yes. And back when I had access to the Next Gen Stats database, I was like looking through his separation metrics, and I'm pretty sure no wide receiver last year created 3 or more yards of separation on more of their targets than Johnson did last year. Like, that dude looked just like a freak separator, and now he's got Big Ben coming off. Hopefully Big Ben's fully healthy. But man, Deontay Johnson and Juju at their prices in redraft leagues right now is just – it's really nice. I mean, Juju, 3rd, 4th round, he'll be on a bunch of my teams. Him and Allen Robinson will both be in a bunch of my teams this year. But I love Deontay Johnson too, and I'd be willing to like throw ADP out of the board. I've thrown ADP out of the window already with Deontay Johnson and taken him like the 7th and 8th round a couple times just because I love him so much.
Man, we're definitely on the same page on that. Drake, did you see that his 2nd tight end?
Let me look here. Mark Andrews. There's my boy, Jay Sternberg. We've been on him, man, for a while.
We talked about Jay Sternberger actually after the draft. We're like, hey, there's no real rookie winners, but there are some holdover winners, and Jay Sternberger might be one of those. We love Jay Sternberger. We talked about him a lot last preseason, but in this offense, with LaFleur, again, this is that Kyle Shanahan style offense. We know they love to make mismatches with their tight ends. Really, all that's in front of him is Robert Tonyan and Mercedes Lewis right now. Man, he's a guy that I liked in college. He has talent, and it's just like, would it surprise me if he's their really number 2 guy in the offense this year? I mean, I think he has that kind of upside to be their number 2, target in the offense. No, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but where you get him in a draft, he's basically free, even in a deep league. Like what you took him in round 16 here. So yeah, I like Sternberger.
Oh baby. I think I own Sternberger. I'm pretty sure I own him in almost every dynasty league. I've been stashing and just waiting. And talk about a post-draft winner. Back at Texas A&M, so Sternberger basically was like a 1-year starter.
Yep, he was a transfer.
Yeah, it was a transfer guy. He's super old too for like a second-year player. I think he's going to turn 24 this year. But anyway, I mean, he led Texas A&M in every single receiving category: receptions, yards per catch, touchdowns. Like, just was their beast mode tight end in that offense. He also, I think, in that draft class, he led PFF's receiving grades among tight ends. And now, like you mentioned, I see it the same way. Like you mentioned, I think he's their number 2. I think Kyle Shanahan and Aaron Rodgers, it'll come down to if Aaron Rodgers trusts him. But I think LaFleur sees him as their George Kittle, their move player, where they're going to put Robert Tonyan and Mercedes Lewis on the line of scrimmage and kind of be the blocking guys. I think they view Sternberger as the run after catch guy. And man, like if he gets 80 to 90 targets this year, like he's going to be a really rock solid high end tight end too. And I think he has a higher ceiling even than that, because like you mentioned, I mean, their receiver core after Devontae Adams is dust. I mean, Aaron Jones might be their second best wide receiver on the team.
Yeah, he is.
They might be lining him up in the slot at some point.
I hope they do, because that touchdown regression is going to be hard, man. Like they need to line him up out of the slot and give him some burn there.
Let me ask you about the quarterback position. I read John Hanson's lessons learned article, and his big thing is he's going to wait. He wants to get a guy who can run. He loves Mahomes. In this draft you just did, you had the 5th pick. Lamar Jackson went 6th overall, and then coming back in the 2nd round, you took Kenyon Drake. The next pick after that was Patrick Mahomes. So people are not afraid to pull the trigger on quarterback. A lot of times people like to say, oh, we like to wait on the quarterback. The evolution of quarterback now, it's guys who can run. You got to make something happen with your legs. So in a best ball, give me best ball and give me redraft, because we got a lot of guys who are big redraft folks listening to the show. Quarterback theory for 2020.
Best ball, if that draft, I'd done like 10 or 12 before. I'd never seen Lamar and Mahomes go so early. And there's a lot of sharp drafters in that room, and it's a 35-round draft, so quarterback scarcity is a little bit different. Was really surprised to see in a sharp room them go that early. And I love,
because in home leagues, you're going to see that this year. People are going to take Lamar in the 1st round.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I love Lamar and Patrick Mahomes, but I think JJ Zacharyson would come to my house and beat me with some sort of sharp object if I started drafting running backs in the first 2 rounds of my leagues. I have no interest in those prices. But yeah, like in best ball leagues this year, I'm way more inclined to just completely fade Jackson and Mahomes and take Prescott and Murray, Kyler Murray in like the 5th, 6th round, if that's what the prices are. For redraft leagues, my strategy always is the same in redraft. I don't even think about quarterback until round 9. I mean, I can always find guys on the waiver wire that I can stream against good matchups. I honestly don't give a shit who my quarterback is in redraft leagues. For best ball, it's a little different, because those guys, there are tier breaks, in my opinion. I mean, Mahomes, Jackson have finished as QB1s in over 70% of their games the last 2 years. They have just insane high floors, high ceilings. I think Dak and Kyler, though, have not the same ceiling that Jackson and Mahomes have, but they have a very close floor projection, and they go 3, 4, 5 rounds later. And for best ball, again, I'm drafting wide receivers in the mid rounds, but if Kyler or Dak slips into the 6th or 7th round, that's definitely going to pique my interest, just because I think they do provide just enough of a positional advantage in a league like that, that it's worth taking in those rounds. But if I'm not getting those guys, I'm just targeting Daniel Jones or Carson Wentz pretty late in the 10th or 11th round. I'm usually happy with that.
Give me a guy for redraft, a guy you're really high on and you're going to target, and then a guy that you're totally fading.
Yeah, for a guy that I'm targeting everywhere is Allen Robinson. The running back scarcity is going to push him into the 3rd, 4th round range. And I want A-Rob as my wide receiver 1 on every team. I'm going to go running back early, and I'm going to look for Allen Robinson in the 3rd or 4th round. I don't think enough people have noticed that A-Rob was 3rd among all wide receivers in targets last year. He had 154. Nick Foles is easily the best quarterback he's ever played, and he's ever played with. And Matt Harmon just published some updated reception perception metrics for Allen Robinson today, and he had him graded as a 98th percentile in terms of success rate versus man coverage last year, and 84th or 97th percentile against press. I mean, A-Rob is just a dude who's always open. He's going to get funneled targets. The Bears didn't add any wide receivers. It's just him and Anthony Miller. I love Allen Robinson quite a bit. Guy I'm fading is Mike Evans. He still goes in a range where, honestly, I just prefer the running backs in the 2nd, 3rd round. I would much rather wait to get A-Rob or Juju in the 3rd or 4th round than take Mike Evans. My concerns for Evans this year are not about him as a player or as a talent. It's just I think the Bucs are going to be a better team this year. The volume won't. I don't think the volume will be there in the same way that it was last year. Jameis threw so many pick sixes and had so many turnover plays where it just kept that team in the game. And now the Bucs have this great front seven. They have underrated corners that I think their defense is going to be even better this year, keep them in games a little bit more. And Brady's not going to turn the ball over. They're going to throw the ball for sure this year. The Bucs are going to be a little more pass heavy than I think people are giving Brady credit for. But yeah, I just don't think we're going to see the same amount of volume for Mike Evans this year. And for that reason, I'm pretty much out at him at his current cost.
I love the Robinson thought. I'm with you. It's like I don't think people realize like how many targets he had. And I think I don't have it in front of me. I don't have it pulled up, and I can't do like Rich Rebar, like, Rain Man, just pull it out of my head. But I want to say like he had the most games last year of at least 26% or more of target share, games on his team. Like 11 of his games, he had 26% or more of the team target share.
That's ridiculous.
And he still, and so, it's insane. I mean, and he had a couple of, bad weeks, that kind of, brought his average down, overall. But
that's because Mitch Trubisky stinks.
Mitch is horrible.
Yes, exactly. That's the point. Yeah. And you're hitting it, on the head. I mean, so if Foles, could just be functional, and not, I personally hate Nick Foles because he cost me $250,000 when he overthrew Zach Ertz 3 years ago.
Oh, God.
But anyway, it was the fantasy, the Football Guys Players Championship.
Oh, man, what a bad beat.
Yeah, I finished second. Yeah, it was against the anyway, Drake and I, we've relived this several times. But yes, so I hate Nick Foles for that because he missed him on like 6 passes in the game. I'm like, just complete one more pass. All I need.
Nick Foles can do no wrong by me.
Yeah, I lost by like 0.78 points, and the drop off was 250 to I won $30,000, so it was a $220,000. Anyway, but yeah, I'm with you. Like Allen Robinson with what you see there. Just real quick, I know it's time to go. I want to be respectful of your time, but we were on the Bears. Any thoughts on the rest of that? I'm with you. Allen Robinson's the obvious lockdown number one. But do you think there's any hope for Anthony Miller? He flashed a little bit last year down the stretch. He had a 21% target share game, a 34%, a 26%, just a third-year receiver, that people had some hope for, coming out of the rookie.
Yeah, I liked Anthony Miller quite a bit last year. I was trying to get him pretty cheap in my dynasty leagues. Last year, he started this season really slowly.
Yes.
He had an ankle injury that persisted all through. He got it in preseason. I think he had it in training camp. Limited him during preseason. In the first month of the year, I think he caught like 4 or 5 balls. I mean, he basically didn't play. But then for the rest of the year, yeah, he was pretty rock solid. He started getting involved more. I think his ankle got a little bit healthier underneath him. And Bears don't have any other wide receivers. I think for redraft purposes this year, for your normal, just like, you start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a flex, like Miller's probably always going to be on like the fringe of relevance for those types of leagues. But for best ball, he's basically free. I mean, again, we talked about a minute ago, like how deep wide receiver is this year. Like Anthony Miller is an 11th, 12th round pick in all the best ball leagues I've done. Like he's out there if you want him, and he's going to for sure have some really solid weeks with Nick Foles. Nick Foles is like, he loves throwing to slot wide receivers, and Anthony Miller is going to line up in the slot the majority of the time for the Bears this year.
Well, folks, if you thought I was happy to sit here and be Bobby the Brain Heenan, I can just imagine the folks out there driving in their cars and listening at home to just an hour and 10 minutes of fantastic fantasy football talk. We can't thank Graham enough. Graham Barfield, at Graham Barfield, co-owner of fantasypoints.com. Go over there. It's free right now, but trust me, pretty soon it's going to be subscription only. They've got some really great, I think it's 30% off. You can get in right now and get the season. There's a couple different packages over there. So go check that out at fantasypoints.com. They got John Hansen, the guru. They've got Joe Dolan. They got Greg Cosell, my boy Adam Kaplan. I should have been, Graham, the first basically John Hansen to win the ACI. I was in the league and I got screwed. I think I had to play Jamal. Remember when Jamal Charles came back that one weird, and then he got hurt. Yes. In like a playoff game. Mm-hmm. I would have beat Hansen there, and I would have won the league. But whatever. I digress. But we thank you so much for the time. Go over to Fantasy Points, everybody. Check out all the great work there, and they're going to kick a lot of ass this year. So, Graham, again, just thank you for the time here with the Fantasy
Thank you, Graham.
Hospital.
Yeah, really appreciate you guys having me on. This is a lot of fun, and we should do this again sometime. Like, I don't know, right before the season. Hopefully, we get a season this year, and would love to talk to you guys before we get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll be here. You can find us on Twitter at FF Hustle. We're on Instagram, FF Hustle, Twitch, you name it. But most importantly, give us a good 5-star review on iTunes. Go find us on YouTube at Fantasy Football Hustle. For Dwayne McFarland, Graham Barfield, I am Brian Drake. We'll see you next week, folks. Never stop hustling.